Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Jill Davey, and I'm one of the Dharma teachers with True North Insight. Thanks for dropping into this meditation tonight on magic of breath. And the reason this arose for me as a topic today is CBC radio, as is often the case for Dharma talks that show up here, is some little prompt from CBC radio. Thank you, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And my video is getting fuzzy, so I might turn on this light here. Holy Hannah, that's brutal. That's so bright. So I was listening to CBC radio, and who was the broadcaster? I can't think of what her name was, but I think it was Tapestry maybe. And they were just introducing a segment it's going to be on later. And it's this author who's written a new book, and her name was Sasha Sagan, Carl Sagan's daughter. Carl Sagan is an astronomer and scientist. And her, Sasha's mother is Anne Druyan, D-R-U-Y-A-N, Druyan, who is an author, producer, and director of the series The Cosmos. And so she has these two very scientifically minded and intelligent and author, scientist parents. And she's written this new book. It sounds fabulous. It's called For Small Creatures Such as We, Rituals for Finding Meaning in Our Unlikely World. And for those who are here on the Zoom call, I'll pop a link to it in the chat here. And if you're practicing with us on the YouTube, I'll put the link down below. And that's it there. For small creatures such as we, rituals for finding meaning in our unlikely world. And so she talks about how important she found it to connect with a sense of wonderment and magic, even though she's from a scientific mindset. So she has looked for, and I think this book is sharing of what she's calling rituals that are based on not on religious or necessarily mystical thinking, but on observing the natural world and the miraculousness of it. And just in this little introduction, it wasn't the full interview with her. She said this line that really caught my attention. She said, just because we understand how something works doesn't mean we can't pay attention to the magic of it. That's beautiful. And we can kind of get this duality in our in much of our thinking of this is magic and this is reality, or this is science. And I love that she's bringing these together to awaken the wonder and the magic of things that, yeah, we can understand how breathing works. The muscle of the diaphragm contracts and moves down and pulls oxygen into the lungs, and you know, we know how that anatomy works of breathing. And but to awaken to the miracle of it is so fantastic. Breathing and this body, being a human, being alive, is bizarre and extraordinary. And we can get kind of funky if we don't pay attention to how wonderful it is. We can get kind of like down and mundane and blasé and taking things for granted. Things like walking and eating and hearing and seeing and breathing. So I appreciated the little wake-up call that line gave me today, of like the magic of breathing. So we were talking earlier in our little Zoom room chat here with a little wisdom harvest of the folks that have signed in tonight, of why mindfulness of breathing is such an important part of most meditation, many meditation practices, but certainly in this practice, it's one of the foundations of the first foundation of mindfulness, mindfulness of the body. Mindfulness of breathing is one of the practices in that first foundation. And mindfulness of breathing is referred to, I could not tell you how many times in the teachings, in the suttas, in the practices, over and over and over, as start here. And you can just stay with mindfulness of breathing. So one of the things that we were talking about is that mindfulness of breathing is a practice that can take us all the way to awakening. In the practice of anapanasati, in breath, out breath, mindfulness, in breath, out breath, remembering, it has all the characteristics and qualities of insight that can lead to awakening, to freedom from suffering. And so some of the things that we were just chatting about, and I'm sure the list is longer than this even, is that it's portable. It's always with us. We don't have to have any special, we don't have to have our meditation cushion. We don't have to have a special app or guided practice or any paraphernalia with us. Our breath is always with us. And because it's always with us, not only is it that awesome that it's always available as a practice to awaken and to be mindful moment by moment at any time. It's right there. So not only that, but like just that in itself, there's so much to that. So that at any moment we can be reconnecting with mindfulness, present moment, embodied awareness, standing in line in the grocery store, in a traffic jam, on a Zoom call, as we're falling asleep, as we're getting annoyed by someone, it's always right there. Another aspect of it being portable is that it's also affordable. You don't have to pay for anything. You don't have to buy anything. We all have access to this as part of this beingness, this suchness, this humanness. So it's accessible. It's free from, it hasn't been colonized. Yay. There's also something about the breath being consistent. We can rely pretty much on the next, and there's another wave of breath coming until eventually we have our last exhalation in this body. So there's a repetitive nature of it. There's some consistency to it. And that can become something that we can rely on. As I'm saying that, I'm aware of that some people, breath is a very precarious place. You know, if you have lung conditions or emphysema or asthma, where it's not a reliable source. So I just want to name that as well. But this repetitive nature of it could lead itself, we could pay attention to that as a calming factor. The wave-like nature of the breath, the inhalation is always followed by the exhalation. And often for myself have the image of like a feather resting on a wave. So the breath is moving in these waves. It could be very subtle waves or sometimes a big wave. And the attention is just like a feather resting on it. And that has that repetitive quality to it. In addition to that, it's each breath is unique, even though there's some wave-like nature to it. Every single breath is completely unique. Not only is the breath unique, but you are a different being each breath. That exhale that just passed is never going to happen again. That breath is gone. And this new moment is arising. And when we really pay attention to the breath, at first, when we're not really paying attention, it's just like breathing, what, in and out, got it. But if we really pay attention, each breath is unique, and we are a different being, breath by breath. So not only is each breath unique, but it's conditioned. It's unique because it's conditioned by everything else that is affecting this being in any given moment. If there's a loud sound, the breath is affected. If there's sleepiness in the body, the breath is affected. If there's annoying thoughts, the breath is affected. If there's sharp sensation in the body, breath is affected. We could go on and on. So it's has this wave-like nature. There's some repetitiveness to it, some consistency. And if we look closely, we see it's unique, breath by breath, changing, impermanent. Someone else was pointing out how embodied the breath is, which is the first foundation of mindfulness, and it's the foundation, it's the foundation that's given the most attention in the 4 foundations of mindfulness, mindfulness of body, and in particular breathing within that. And so breathing is embodied. We feel the sensations in this body, and we can feel it in lots of different places in the body. We can pay attention at the coolness or warmth at the nostrils, the rise and fall of the chest, the belly moving, expanding, contracting. You can feel it in the back of the body, in the throat. Sometimes we can feel like the whole body is breathing. We know, the anatomy of it, of what's happening with the lungs and diaphragm, etc. And when we let go of what's known, we can experience sometimes the whole body is affected by the breath. Whole body is being oxygenated. The muscles are affected all the way through the body, the skin, etc. And not only can we feel it in many places in the body, but it feels different in different places. And so this can help us stay engaged. It makes it an interesting practice. Yeah. We covered most of them there. Yeah, accessible, always changing. can lead to awakening. And I was reminded of this little story that I'll share before we go into the practice. You know, it's going to be about, I say it's going to happen around 2:15, 2:16 this tonight, 2:16 a.m. I'm going to wake up and remember, oh yeah, that was the other thing about mindfulness of breath I wanted to say. That's when it's going to hit me. So this book, Breath by Breath, The Liberating Practice of Insight Meditation. Beautiful book by Larry Rosenberg. It's not too big. It's awesome, with David Guy also. I'll put the link to it down below in the YouTube. And yeah, Breath by Breath, Liberating Practice of Insight Meditation by Larry Rosenberg. Ooh, that sounds good. Okay. So here's a little story in this book that's fabulous. And and this is something that someone else pointed out in our chat, that he says here that it's a source of life, the breath. It's we're alive when we're breathing, and when we're not in the same way. Always mindful, the meditator breathes in. Mindful, the meditator breathes out. He says it sounds simple, of course, but it's actually, as anyone knows who has tried it, a profound and difficult practice. The fact is that when we focus on the breath, we are focusing on the life force. Life begins with our first breath and will end with our last. To contemplate breathing is to contemplate life itself. So all of these things that we talked about, it's conditioned, it's impermanent, it's arising and passing. We're born on an inhale and we will die on an exhale. So here's this story. An ancient teaching from India points to this truth. There was a conference of all the human faculties, all the senses, which in the Indian tradition are 6 senses, and same in this Buddhist meditation. There's the 5 sense doors that we're used to, and the mind is also considered one of the sense doors. As at many meetings, they first had to decide who would be in charge of this meeting. So sight popped up and put in its bid, creating beautiful images that had everyone enraptured. Ooh, you can see how enticing sight is and all those wonders. And then smell arose and created powerful and haunting aromas that left everyone tingling with anticipation. But taste could top that, with astounding and delectable flavors from all the world's cuisines. Then hearing created exquisite harmonies that brought everyone to tears. And of course, the body brought on physical sensations that had everyone in ecstasy. Finally, the mind spun out intellectual theories that took on beauty by the depths of the truths they expressed. Along came the breath, not even one of the senses, and said it wanted to be in charge. All it could present was this simple in and out breath. Not terribly impressive in the face of everything else. And we notice this in our practice, right? Well, that's not as interesting as what I could think about or taste or look at or be entertained with or feel. So no one even noticed it. And the other senses got into a tremendous argument about which one would be chosen to lead. The breath, in its disappointment, began walking away. And the images began to fade. The taste lost their savor and the sounds diminished. Wait, the senses called out, come back, you can lead. We need you. and the breath came back and took its proper place. It's a good story because it's so true how, well, it is for this being anyways, how delighted we can be with our other senses, and particularly the mind. Like, yes, I've been breathing for a while. That's good. That's fine. But let's worry about that thing again, because we didn't quite rework history yet. Let's try again. Well, let's see if we can go over this thing again and how great we're going to look when it comes out like this. And everyone follows their role the way I've written it for them. We're just so fascinated by the delights of our mind, or the pleasure sensations of the body, or the sights, smells, tastes, etc. And we wouldn't have any of them if we didn't have the breath. So let's practice. Yes. I'm going to turn off this overhead light because I feel like I'm in a lab here. It's so bright. Oh, wow, that got really dark. What's that? It's a bad thing to do. You shouldn't walk away on a YouTube recording. Don't do this. There we go. That's a little nicer. So adjust your posture, get comfortable. You might like to lay down, or you could practice standing or walking. See what other supports you need. You might like to dim your lights or turn away from the screen, especially if you've been on screen a lot through this day, which is the way of the days these days. So once you've come into the posture that feels supportive for your practice tonight, include an awareness of the posture for the eyes. So that may be eyes closed, or eyes resting downward, slightly open. For some bodies, at some times, it can be helpful to have the eyes open and looking perhaps out a window, or at something peaceful in your space, or looking around your room just to calm your nervous system and to feel oriented to where you are. And not hurrying to the breath. Allow yourself several minutes at the beginning of your practice just to land into your posture. Any adjustments you need so that you can come into stillness. And as you settle, any tension that isn't needed right now can start to just drip or drape off the body, so the face softens. The sides of the neck lengthen as the shoulders drop. See if some of the inner layers of the belly can soften, particularly helpful with breathing meditation to allow some softness in the belly as much as is available for you right now. Hands relaxed. Like grains of sand in an hourglass, settling down, feeling more presence, groundedness through the pelvis and legs and feet. And then as the posture feels settled, somewhat settled or settling, relaxing, grounding, at some point, your attention will naturally touch the breath. And it probably happened just there because I mentioned breath. But when you're practicing on your own, allow yourself to just wait until you feel a breath. And then remembering happens. The mindfulness, sati, begins. Ah, yes, breath. My home, my anchor, my resting place. And if you've been practicing mindfulness of breath, you probably already have a place where you feel the breath. And if not, just see where you most easily feel sensation of the breath. You might need a few slightly deeper breaths to feel the sensations of breathing. There's 2 or 3 like that. And wherever you most easily feel that sensation, we could just rest there now for the remainder of this practice. So it might be the sensation in the center of the belly as the belly expands and contracts. Or it might be the center of the chest as it rises and falls, rising and falling. Or it might be this sensation of the breath at the nostrils, slightly cooler on the inhale, warmed by the body on the exhale. If you can feel the breath easily in all of these places and find it hard to just choose one, then you could just go ahead and just settle at the belly. One isn't better than the other, just choosing one and we'll settle. And in the beginning, we might just be noticing this wave-like nature of the breath. It's a sense of repetitiveness, consistency of it arising and passing. And perhaps in a short amount of time, we notice the mind will kick in and say, wait a minute, I've got something much more interesting for you to pay attention to. Remember when they did, or let's figure out how we're going to be in the future. We just notice the mind trying to take over, be in charge. And we say, not right now, just this breath. And as we stay resting lightly like that feather on a wave of tension, just floating with each in and out breath being known, we can also feel and attend to how each moment is being born, having its life, and passing away with each breath. The source of life. And even though each breath is an embodied experience, it's not mine. We breathe in what the trees breathe out, and the trees breathe in what we breathe out. It's embodied, felt in this present moment, and it's not mine. And when we really pay attention to each breath, we can attune to its uniqueness. It's conditioned. Sometimes the inhale is longer than the exhale or shorter. Or exhale longer or shorter. Part of the breath could be smooth and part of it rough, staggered. The breath can be shallow or deep, subtle or gross, fast or slow. And all of these changes in the breath are because it's conditioned by our thoughts, the state of the body, sensations, sound. Other smells can condition the breath. Our relationship to the breath can affect the breath. The breath has these two qualities of being both automatic, it's just happening, autonomic, and it can be affected or slightly controlled. And in Vipassana, we do our best to not control the breath. Just let it be so that we can see its changing nature. If we feel sleepy or dullness, lack of attention, we can float the question, which part of the breath is most engaging or awakening? And if we're restless or agitated, we could ask the body, the mindfulness, which part of the breath is most calming? And if we're both wired but tired, we can pay attention to the whole cycle of each breath and see how it has this awakening and calming nature in each breath. If our attention is slipping away often, we can see if we can notice which part of the breath does the attention start to slide away. Each breath is only happening in this present moment. Are you awake to it? Just because we know how it works doesn't mean it isn't magic. And in a few moments, as I ring the bell 3 times, you might notice how the breath is conditioned or affected by that and by the thoughts that accompany. And just allow yourself to stay present with your awareness until the end of the 3rd sound, and gently then ending your practice in the way that's meaningful to you. And even as your practice is ending, you can continue with this light awareness of the breath and how it's conditioned. And it's a helpful little place where we think is the end of a practice and the beginning of, I don't know what that would be, non-practice life. And that little place, like right now, is such an important place to continue awareness as you open eyes and move and talk or whatever else happens for you. To continue with some continuity, which then can really become such a touch point through the day as you're doing the life thing, to be able to just like be with the breath through that. A couple of the other things arose in awareness while we were practicing is that the breath is always in the present moment. What? Yes. And whereas the mind, we may notice, is often not. Mind is drawing from the past, rehashing the past, or projecting into the future, or embellishing the present. And mindfulness of body and breath is always right here, right now. And it both has these qualities of it being autonomic. Body breathes. I'm not making it happen. It's doing it. Thank you very much. And it's also conditioned, can be affected. You know, I can hold it or control it. And so, but as I said, we try to not control the breath. That can take years to stop controlling the breath and just let the body breathe. So if you find that hard to do, know that you're not alone. And but those two qualities can point to lots of different things. Yeah. So I'll put the link to this book, and I think it was on Tapestry that they were saying they were going to be interviewing the author Sasha Sagan, Sasha Sagan, about her book on CBC radio. So if you get a chance to listen to that, it might be interesting as well. So those links will be down below in the YouTube, and also a link to offer support to for these teachings to continue if you would like to or are able to. And if you're here on the Zoom, you're welcome to hang out. Thanks for joining us if you're on the recording. See you again, maybe.